Hello, my name's Kerry. I'm a 35-year-old woman who's been through a lot these last few years thanks to my no good ex-husband. Thankfully, I never have to deal with him again, but I do want to share my story with whoever's willing to listen. I met my ex-husband Cooper when we were in college. We attended a community college because neither of us had the funds to go to a better university, and neither of us came from wealthy families. Right off the bat, we related to our struggles growing up in a way that made me feel very seen and understood, which was something I didn't get to experience much considering I was the middle child in my family. Anyway, Cooper and I dated throughout college, and after we graduated, we moved into an apartment together. Now, I took care of a huge portion of the bills because Cooper couldn't seem to find himself a job. I tried my best to help him out, but the jobs I found were either not up to his standards or too much work. I didn't complain about having to shoulder most of the bills because I loved Cooper, and I thought that he was just at a stage in life where he was trying to figure things out. In hindsight, I should have seen the warning signs and run away immediately, but here I am. A year after we graduated and moved in together, I ended up pregnant. At this point, I was terrified. I didn't have the resources to take care of Cooper myself and the baby, but luckily, Cooper stepped up and showed me that he was capable of being a great father. He got a pretty decent job and worked hard to save up for the baby. After we found out the sex of our baby, we were having a baby boy. I guess we actually realized how drastically our lives were going to change. And that's when it hit us that we hadn't gotten married yet. So Cooper proposed to me and we had a courthouse marriage just a few days later. Even though it was nothing big or extravagant, didn't mean that it wasn't the best day of my life, at least back then. My son, Chris, was born shortly after that at a healthy weight of 7 pounds and 6 ounces. One look at his precious face and I knew that there was no way that I was going to let anything or anyone hurt him. Cooper was an amazing father right off the bat. I never fought with him about his responsibilities, and he made sure to take care of me as well as the baby. I fell even deeper in love with him by this point. We were still struggling financially, but we were a lot happier than we were before. 2 years after Chris was born, Cooper's mom passed away. I wasn't exactly close to her, but she was a good woman. Chris was not close to his mother at all, but he still grieved her loss. The only good thing that came out of her passing was that she left Chris her house. That house had been passed down to her by Cooper's great-grandmother, so while it was a relatively new ancestral home, the only thing we really looked for was the fact that the house was fully paid off. We moved into that home once everything regarding Cooper's mom's death was settled and began our new lives there. Initially, things were like they always were, but then I began noticing changes in Cooper. He became a lot more sullen and upset. He refused to talk to me. He barely helped out with Chris. He would, in fact, just ignore Chris. Chris would scream and cry for his father, but Cooper would barely bother. At first, I thought that he was just grieving the loss of his mother and that maybe living in his childhood home was affecting him. But over time, I began to realize that those were just his usual behaviors coming back from before Chris was born, except that they were a lot more intense. Cooper lost his job pretty quickly and we were back to managing the house on a single income. I couldn't keep us afloat on just one paycheck, so I had to pick up a second job. I barely spoke to Cooper because I could feel anger and hatred festering in him, and I did not want that spilling over. I also didn't leave him because I was terrified of being a single mother and I didn't want to raise Chris in a broken home. I continued to work 2 jobs for 3 years until I'd had enough and told Cooper to get his act together and get a job or I would leave. Cooper took my threats seriously and found himself a job. It was just enough for him to cover our utility bills, so he told me he'd do that. Over the next 2 years, that was our arrangement. I thought we'd gotten through the worst, but little did I know that the worst was yet to come. Cooper began heavily drinking and smoking. The people at his new workplace would constantly take him out for drinks and smokes, and that bled into his home life as well. I did my best to deal with it and keep my son away from his messy father, but my breaking point came when I received an email that was a warning to pay off our electricity and water bills by the end of the month, or our electricity and water would be shut off. I flew into a rage that day. I used Cooper's laptop to check his bank transactions and found that he had been using all his pay for months to drink and gamble. He was in so much debt. I felt bile rise up at the sight of it. At that moment, I knew that I couldn't continue to be with him. So I quickly grabbed all my most important things and Chris's things and Chris before heading out. I was about an hour away from home when Cooper called me in a panic. "Carrie, where are you?" "I'm gone, Cooper. I do not want anything to do with you anymore." "What do you mean? What did I do?" "You did nothing, literally. If I continued to stay with you, we would all end up homeless. I can't have that happening." "What are you even talking about?" "You were supposed to pay off our utility bills. Tell me why I got an email telling me that we were 6 months overdue." "I can explain that. I didn't earn as much as I should have. Yet you earned enough to fund your drinking? You lied to me, Cooper, for months. I cannot keep doing this with you. I looked at your bank statements. You earned more than enough. You just chose to spend all the money on booze and your gambling addiction. I cannot let you destroy mine and our sons' lives like that. You can't just up and leave one day. Where is Chris? He's safe with me. You can't keep me away from my son that way." "Yes, I can. You're going to ruin him if he continues to be around you any longer. I don't want him to grow up thinking that the way you acted was normal and acceptable. Our boy should have a bright future ahead of him. And the only way he'll get that is if he's away from you. You know that you legally can't do that, right?" "I know, but I have enough proof of your inability to take care of him so I can have temporary custody of him until we figure out the divorce." "Divorce? Are you seriously going to divorce me over a few unpaid bills?" "Those few unpaid bills are in the thousands right now. I do not have that kind of money to pay it off. They're going to shut it down soon and I need to get out. I left a good portion of the bill payment on the countertop, but you're going to have to figure the rest of it out. I cannot let you be a part of my life ever again." "Isn't there any way we can talk about this? Do you really want our child growing up in a broken home?" "I only stayed with you because I didn't want that. If it was up to me, I would have left you 5 years ago. But now I realize that being a part of a broken home is better than watching your parents hate each other." "You've gone mad. I will not let you get custody of Chris." "You don't get to decide anything. If you really want to get equal custody of Chris, you need to get your act together. No judge or jury will let you have equal custody of your son when you barely earn anything, drink like a fish and gamble away all your earnings." "Just you wait. I'm going to win custody of Chris, and then I'm going to make your life miserable. I'd like to see you wake up and not drink immediately first. Bye." I had no idea where I was driving, but I knew that I needed to get away from Cooper. As long as he had no idea where I was, I wouldn't mind. I ended up calling a friend who was more than happy to let me put up at her place for as long as I needed to get back on my feet. I stayed with her for almost 3 months before I finally had enough money to rent my own apartment. I then began saving up for the divorce. I knew that Cooper was not going to make things any easier for me, so I needed enough money to pay off a good lawyer. Thankfully, I managed to find a great lawyer who was willing to work for however much I could pay him. It took over a year to get the divorce settled, and once it finally was, I was given full custody of Chris. Cooper had no financial stability and had a history of drinking and gambling, none of which is a stable environment for a child. He was given visitation rights 1 weekend a month. I hated that, but I made peace with that. I continued to work hard until I managed to land myself a pretty good job that allowed Chris and I to live more than comfortably. Chris would visit his dad once a month, and while he wasn't the biggest fan of his father, he never made a fuss about it. I cut off all contact with Cooper, and unless it was to coordinate drop-off and pick-up times for Chris, I didn't bother to talk to Cooper. The arrangement worked for us for 5 years. However, in the 5th year, Chris was about 12 at that time, I began to notice Chris becoming rather scared of going over to his dad's place. I remember I talked to him about it once, but Chris just brushed it off. I didn't push it further and I forgot about it, which is something I deeply regret. This odd behavior of Chris's continued for a year and I never once questioned him again. I did my best to be there for him, but he made sure to push me away all the time. One particular weekend, I dropped Chris off at his father's at around 5 in the evening. However, at midnight, I heard loud bangs on my front door. I was terrified, but one look at my Ring camera and I felt better. It was Chris. That ease was quickly washed away with worry about why he was at my place at that hour instead of his father's. I was even more alarmed when Chris lifted his head and I saw that he was crying. "Chris, sweetie, what are you doing here? Where's your father?" "Mom, oh my God, why are you crying? Are you hurt?" I'm not hurt. I just, calm down, sweetie. Take a few deep breaths. You're okay. Mom's here with you. Take your time and tell me what happened. Come in and let me get you some hot chocolate. No, I need to tell you. Okay, sweetie, what is it? Please don't leave me alone with Dad again. What? Why? Did he do something to you? Mom, please don't be mad at me, but every time I went over to Dad's place, he would hit me. Look at my arms and legs. What? Oh my God, my darling. I could never be mad at you. Why did you not tell me though? Dad threatened to hurt me more if I told on him, and I didn't know what to do. I really wanted to tell you, but I was so scared. Oh, sweetie, I'm so glad that you came to me about this. I could never be mad at you about this, okay? I promised to take better care of you, but did something happen tonight that made you come running to me? Well, Dad always acted funny before he hit me, and I wanted to see what it was. Funny? What do you mean? He would come back home from work or wake up in the morning or whatever, and he'd behave normally. He would be nice to me and he'd crack jokes with me, but then he'd go into his room or he'd stay in the living room after I went up to my room, and then suddenly he'd become this angry monster. The tiniest thing would upset him enough to start beating me. Oh my God. Yes. So I decided to figure out what was wrong with him. I mean, his mood was shifting so fast that I knew that something must have been upsetting him. So I set up my phone tonight to record the living room where he was sitting. And that's when I found him doing this. Oh my God. Is that cocaine? What in the world? I don't know what that was, but I knew that it was a drug. I wanted to stay in my room, but I needed to get my phone back before Dad saw it. I went downstairs and Dad got mad at me for being up past 10, so he beat me up. I even caught that on the camera. But once Dad was done, I managed to get my phone back. I looked at the recording and managed to run away to you. Oh, sweetie, this is way too much for you to be dealing with. Don't worry about anything. I'll take care of this. But you definitely deserve hot chocolate tonight. Why don't you take a nice warm shower while I get that ready for you? Thank you for believing me, Mom. No, I'm sorry that I hadn't paid better attention to you. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you properly. I know you'll protect me with everything you have now, so it's okay. I'll go take that shower now. I felt so beyond ashamed of myself for not looking deeper into the signs. Chris had to go through so much just because I chose to turn a blind eye. I can't even put into words how much I hated Cooper at that moment. I wanted to go over to his place and rip him to shreds, but I knew that the right thing to do was to inform the authorities about Cooper's behavior and his drug use. Honestly, I would love to say that Cooper using drugs came as a shock to me, but it really did not. It seemed like a natural step after watching him use alcohol until he could barely stay up. I just hated that he put Chris in the middle of it all. After I made sure that Chris was doing better, I called the cops and explained my situation to them. I tried to get more information out of Chris just to make sure that I hadn't missed out on any important information, but Chris had nothing else to say. 15 minutes after I made the call, there was a knock on my door. There were 2 police officers standing there. I had Chris go up to his bedroom so I could talk to the officers. Hi, ma'am. I'm Officer Calvin, and this is my partner, Officer Damon. You called 911 about an emergency? Yes, my son. He was supposed to be at his father's house this weekend, but he ran away and came back here. When I asked him why, he told me that his father had been hitting him after doing drugs. I have no idea what kind of drugs, but they were definitely drugs. Are you sure they were drugs, ma'am? And how do you know that drugs were involved in this? You and your son's father are divorced, right? How long has it been, and how old was your son at that time? Yes, my son's father and I got divorced 5 years ago. My son Chris was 7 years old at that time. And before you think about it, no, my son did not make up those stories. He showed me video evidence. He secretly recorded his father doing the drugs before his father hit him. All right, can we see your son in the video? Of course. Chris, could you come down for a few minutes, sweetie? Yes, Mom. You called? Who are they? Sweetie, I called the police. I feel like they are the best ones to take care of this situation. They wanted to talk to you and to see the video you showed me. Oh, yeah, of course. Here's the video that I took. That's your father? Yes, sir. When did you take this video? Just a few hours ago. How long has he been abusing you? And do you have any idea about how long he's been using drugs? Dad was granted custody rights only 2 years ago, but he was good to me then. The abuse only started a year and a half ago, and I noticed his odd behavior around then. So I guess he's been using drugs for a year and a half, but I can't be entirely certain. Well, we have some concerning news for you two. We've actually been looking into this man for a while now. I don't understand. What do you mean? For weeks now, we've been getting complaints regarding noises and late-night rendezvous at his place. Rendezvous? A bunch of people have been coming over to his place late at night. After a little profiling, we've identified most of them to be various drug addicts. We've been suspicious that Chris's father was selling drugs, but we never had any concrete evidence of that. But Chris, you've provided us with all the evidence we've been searching for. I'm so sorry that you had to go through all of that, but I hope you'll feel better knowing that you helped get a drug peddler off the streets. It's okay, and it's nice to know that I could help somehow. I'm a little confused. How is this video proof that Cooper is selling? I mean, it's proof that he's using, right? It is, but it gives us the chance to get a warrant to search his house. And I'm sure when we'll search his house, we'll find something. The warrant will be ready in an hour. Why don't the both of you wait in my living room? In exchange, I want to be there with you when you walk into Cooper's place. That is not a smart idea at all, Miss Rogers. Yes, Miss Rogers, we don't know how dangerous Cooper really is, and we can't risk you getting hurt. I won't get hurt. I promise to not step foot in his home. I just want to talk to him. He laid his hands on my son, and I do not want to let him go scot-free that way. Please, I'm begging you. Fine, but you cannot set foot into the house at all. At any sign of aggression from Cooper, we will pull you out of the situation. Do you understand? Absolutely. My heart was racing. Yeah, I expected Cooper to do drugs, but I never once thought he'd start selling or just in general doing very illegal things. I only got more terrified when I realized that Cooper had endangered Chris by bringing drug addicts into the house while Chris was there. I'm not one to be prejudiced against drug addicts. I recognize that it's a genuine disease. But what I do not agree with is exposing kids to adults who are unable to function because of how strung out they are. While we waited for the warrant to get approved, the police officers sat in my living room while my mind raced with all the ways that Chris had been endangered. I couldn't help but be thankful to God that Chris was safe and alive. When the warrant came, I had Chris go to bed. I told him that I would be back as soon as everything was done and left with the officers. We got the warrant and drove as fast as possible to Cooper's place. Before we left the car, the officers, Calvin and Damon, reminded me that I was not going to be able to go into the house. I assured them that I just wanted to confront Cooper and surprise him with the fact that he had been caught. We waited in the car for about 10 minutes before we were joined by other squad cars that surrounded Cooper's place. Once everyone was in place, Officer Calvin and Officer Damon and I made our way to Cooper's door. When Cooper opened the door, he looked like he was strung out on multiple drugs, but the sight of the two officers immediately woke him up. "Carrie, what are you doing here, and why do you have two cops with you? If you're here to take Chris, you know that it's my time with him, and that is court-ordered. You have no right to bring these cops here." "Oh, I think I have all the right in the world to be standing here with these lovely officers. Where is Chris?" "He's sleeping." "Are you sure? Because last time I checked, he was at my place sleeping in his bed there." "That's a load of nonsense. Is this your strategy, to lie your way into getting full custody of my son?" "I'm not lying about anything. I know about what you've been doing to him." "Oh, and what have I been doing to him?" "I saw the bruises all over his arms and legs. I know that you've been hitting him, and I also know that you've been doing drugs." "Drugs? Are you really reaching that far? You want me arrested just because you want to have custody of Chris?" "I have proof of you doing drugs." "Officers, I'm sure there's a better way to use our tax money instead of listening to some loony lady's claims." "Sir, here is a warrant to search your house. We do have reason to believe that what Miss Rogers is saying is true." "You can't be serious. I don't want you in my house or looking into my things." "Sir, this is necessary, and if you resist, we will force our way in. We're asking you peacefully to allow us into your house." "This is crazy. What kind of evidence do you even have? For all you know, Carrie could have edited something and made it look like me. You have no idea how foul and crazy this lady is. She literally left me because she was delusional enough to think that she could do better than me." "I was not being delusional. You were a horrible person to be around. You always drank and constantly smelled of smoke. You lied to me for years about where you were spending your money, and you almost made us homeless. Why would I want to stay with someone like that?" Regardless of your personal issues, there have also been reports by neighbors in this area of loud noises and late-night meetings happening at your place. That, coupled with the evidence that Miss Rogers brought us, has allowed us to make sure that there's nothing illegal happening here. If you truly haven't been doing anything bad in here, you have nothing to worry about. At best, we'd only request you to be careful with loud noises past 10 o'clock. "They're right, Cooper. If you have nothing to hide, let them in." "This is not about me hiding things. This is about my privacy being invaded." "Sir, this is a warrant to search your house. Feel free to read it, but we have to do our duty. If you'll excuse us now." Damon pulled me further away from the house and made me sit in the police car. He told me to not get out of the car unless explicitly told so. I assured him that I would stay put, and Damon ran into the house to help the rest of his colleagues. The policemen were in there for a fairly long time, and with every minute that passed, my heart beat faster. I couldn't help but worry that Cooper had somehow managed to get rid of all the evidence of his crime and was going to make mine and Chris's lives hell once this was over. Luckily, when the cops came out, they had Cooper in handcuffs and a pretty big bag that looked heavy. They found a good amount of drugs in Cooper's house, and when the cops found it, Cooper tried to run away. In his attempt to run away from his fully surrounded house, he injured two officers, which was another offense. It was only after I saw the cop car with Cooper in it drive away that I finally managed to calm my heart rate. Damon and Calvin came back to the car and checked in on me before driving me back home. Chris had been awake, waiting for me. I gave him the biggest hug and let him know that his father was arrested and was going to be away for a long, long time. Chris was so relieved that he began crying. I couldn't even imagine the kind of joy that my child must have felt, and I couldn't help but wonder how messed up it was that Chris was happy that his father was gone. Cooper messed up big time, and he was going to pay for it. The following months were nothing short of tiring. The first thing that happened was that Cooper was charged with a felony and was sentenced to 20 years in prison for that. Assaulting 2 police officers landed him with an extra 2 years in prison. Abusing Chris landed him an extra year, and he was sentenced to a total of 23 years in prison. Cooper looked defeated during those court hearings. I wish I could say that I felt sorry for him, but all I felt was immense anger and hatred towards him for what he did to Chris. I wanted him put away for as long as possible. After that, though, I had to work out the custody rights of Chris. Since Cooper was a felon, his parental rights were forfeited, and I became the sole custodian of Chris. Chris and I were beyond ecstatic about it, and we even went to Chris's favorite restaurant to celebrate that. Other than having his parental rights revoked, Cooper's home was also taken in by the government because of his surmounting loans. Cooper was going to have a rough time when he came out of prison, and I couldn't have been happier about that. I made sure to put Chris into therapy, even though he told me almost 1,000,000 times that he was doing completely fine. I still wanted to double check. Besides, there's nothing wrong with a regular therapy appointment. Chris has only been thriving since I've gotten full custody of him, and I feel like I'm the happiest person alive because of it. It'll be a while before I stop being so overprotective of Chris, but I've put myself into therapy too, so I'll work through it. All that's left for Chris and I to do now is to live our lives the best way that we can. Thanks for listening.